What's up? You obviously read the title of this video, so you know we'll be doing some rigging today. Making a VTuber model is much like a dinner party, where you have to prepare the food, set the table, invite the guests. It may be confusing at first, but not to worry, it really is very simple. In this video, we will be using the free version of Live2D Cubism, and I will guide you through dealing with its various limitations as well. I just want to put out a few disclaimers before we start, however. Number 1, I am in no way a professional at the Live2D program, nor have I been rigging for very long. And number 2, I have only done a limited number of models, therefore I may not be the best model maker. So anything I may suggest to separate when drawing your model is to be taken with a grain of salt. Just another reminder that I will not be doing a full dive on how to rig each individual part. I will simply only give out some footnotes, so this video will not be a full-on how to rig a VTuber model. Anyways, without further ado, let's get this dinner party started! Alrighty, so the first thing on the list is preparing the food, right? So, how are we going to get started rigging this VTuber model? Before you can actually do any rigging though, you actually have to prepare the model for the rigging process. So how do I do that? The first thing that you have to do is make an art mesh for everything. What is an art mesh? It's basically what's going to allow your VTuber model to be visible in a tracking program like VTube Studio. So we're going to make one for every single layer. You have to keep in mind that you can only have up to 100 art meshes, which means that you can't exceed 100 layers, since you have to put an art mesh in every layer. So I'm going to go ahead and make an art mesh for every single layer on this model here. I'm going to click the first layer, which is my flower left, which is this guy over here, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to the last layer. I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to click the last thing. It should select every single layer that you have, and then you're going to go to the auto button up here, and this pop-up should appear. Click on the drop down and select standard. This will create a fairly good art mesh that is a good start. Click X, and this is what your model should look like. Don't worry, you can just click away and it should look back to normal. Some panels here on this side here that are important are the deformer and parameter menus. The parameters are what is going to allow your model to move. So I have an already made model over here, and as you can see, all the parameters are set, and this is probably what your model is going to look like after it's done. Everything is going to be in its place. You're going to have all the parameters in place. So we have our head angles. This model doesn't have the best head angles. We have the eye opening and closing, the eyeball movement, all that jazz. The next panel that you're going to want to keep in mind of is the deformer panel. This is where the deformers are going to be mostly visible in. So these guys up here. So this button makes a warp deformer, and this one makes a rotation deformer. We're going to talk about those more later. Alright, so the next panel here is the parameter panel, and this panel is quite unique on itself since it's going to be what's going to help your model move. And something that I'm also going to do for this model is that you can put everything into folders. So we have our angles, our eyes, etc, etc. On my already made model, you can see that I put everything into its own folder. I'm going to do the same thing for this model. So I'm going to click the first parameter that I want and then the last parameter that I want, holding shift. I'm going to click on this button over here and it should create a folder. You can name the folder whatever you want. I'm going to name it angles. The thing that is unique about this is that you can right click and you can actually color these. I'm going to draw a rainbow for this one. So let me do that really quick. And a cool thing that you can also do, instead of selecting any of these colors, you can actually choose your own colors on the advanced settings. I'm gonna go with a pretty pink. There we go. Alrighty, we have everything organized and into their own folders. The next thing that many riggers actually recommend doing is making a warp deformer for the main areas per se. So I'm actually going to make a warp deformer for everything. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did for making an art mesh, which is the shift move. I'm going to click this, and as you can see here, this pop-up, the maximum number of deformers, this means both rotation and warp deformers, is 50. Alright, I'm going to name this all. And all these other settings, I don't recommend messing around with them, but you can if you want to. Click create, and you should have a warp deformer for everything here. Now Live2D does have a default of 27 parameters, so the maximum is actually 30 of them. So if you want to have extra physics or anything, you might want to delete some of these. I personally don't really have a use for the cheek parameter, so I'm gonna just delete this by clicking the trash can over here. Now I have 26. So that gives us like maybe 4 extra ones that we could use. Another thing that's important is that you can only assign a total of 2 parameters for each part. So I can only assign 2 parameters for, let's say, this flower L. I'm going to do this now since I don't plan on changing this model in any way or adding anything to it, but I'm going to make a texture atlas. And a texture atlas is basically what you're going to need for your model to be visible. So this is where your art mesh actually goes. And as you can see by this message here, the maximum number of texture atlases that you can have is 1, and the limit of pixels is 2048. So click OK, name the texture atlas anything you want, maybe your model name, and we're gonna go to the limit. I do recommend that you keep the width and the height the same number, just so it's a perfect square and it gives you more space to add different textures or just to have your textures all laid out and not overlapping. That's very important. And due to this limit, I do recommend that you make your PSD resolution in the 2000 to 3000 pixel range, just so you can have everything nice and high quality. You don't want to lose quality, especially when you're making a VTuber model. On this side over here, you are going to see unset textures as the default. So this is basically the textures that are not on the texture atlas that maybe do need to be on the texture atlas, and you can do that simply just by dragging them into here. I don't have any, so I'm not going to do that. You can mess around with these. I'm going to click all, and this is all the textures that are on the texture atlas as well as not on the texture atlas. Kind of confusing, but mess around with it a bit and you should probably get it. Alright, if everything is nice and neat and where you want it to be, click OK, and it should make the texture atlas for you. Now you have a texture atlas and you are able to export your model. Another thing that is recommended is that you clip things that need to be clipped. For example, I clipped some things like the shadow here and the pupils to their respectable places, but the clipping does not translate to the program, so you have to do that manually. So for the face shade, I'm going to go to the inspector here, and this is basically the information about the specific part. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the ID of the face and I'm going to paste it into the clipping ID of the face shadow. And now the shadow should not leave the face. I'm going to do the same thing with my pupils. Alrighty, now that we have our model prepared and set for rigging, let's go on over to our next step, which is setting the table. So this is where rigging is actually going to start. Like I said in the intro, I will not be going over each individual part, and I will not be rigging each individual part either. But instead, I will be giving you some tips and tricks on how to probably successfully animate each of your parts. So the first tip is to make an art mesh for the parts in which are going to distort heavily. So these parts are the eyes, the mouth, or any other part in which you are going to distort heavily. This is so your animations have a clean, smooth, and overall aesthetically pleasing look to them. Next up is keyforms, and they allow you to actually save the animations that you make. You need to remember to click on either of the green dots at the top of the parameter panel in order for the animations to set. I have made an eye keyform chart just as an example to show you what I'm talking about. As you can see, -1 is the eye closed, and 0 is the eye open, and then +1 is the eye wide open. Tying a bit to tip 2, tip 3 consists of mouth rigging. I recommend you follow along on this Yoshino art tutorial as she goes in depth into mouth rigging. If you want to do some lip syncing, I recommend this guide by Ransom VT, which gives an accurate lip sync when tracking. If you want your model to look symmetrical, and you probably should, then tip 4 is perfect for you. I'll be going over 3 different methods of reflection in which you can use to make your model look even more symmetrical. To reflect a part, you have to remember to have all the layers in which that part consists of selected. And then you're going to Ctrl-C to copy and then Ctrl-V to paste. Then you're going to right click on the part, click reflect, and then you're going to reflect all the parameters. And in this case, since we have the eye, I'm going to reflect horizontally, but depending on the part, you have to reflect vertically. Click OK. And now the part is reflected. Since the part is completely reflected from the original, we have to change that. So select all the parts in which are in your IL open and then deselect your originals to only have selected your new ones. Then you're going to right click on that parameter, click change, and then change to IR open. Then you're going to go again and then click reflect this time. So now your motions should be the same on both eyes. In order to reflect motion, you must click on these 3 lines, which are the palette menu, and then click reflect motion. Since we're reflecting the angle X, I'm going to reflect horizontally, but again, it depends on which part you are going to reflect. Click OK, and then your motion should be reflected. Please note that this may not work if you have 2 different parameters in which face 2 completely different directions. If you have a combined parameter and it looks something like this, you're going to want to synthesize corners. To do that, you have to select all the parts in which are in the parameter, and then you're going to go back to the palette menu and you're going to click synthesize corners. Then just hit OK and your corners should be synthesized. Just as we get to the final stretch of the race, I just wanted to go over some tools in which I wish I knew when I started to rig. These tools include, but are not limited to, the Path Deformer and the Deformer brush. The Path Deformer uses points as a tool. The points are used to easily distort parts, so it comes in handy in shaping parts in which are going to distort heavily. It is recommended that you put no more than 5 points, as the more points you add, the more difficult it gets to deform the art mesh. The Deformer brush allows you to distort parts by pushing them, like a normal brush, while holding the B key, enlargen by left-clicking to the right, and shrink by left-clicking to the left. If you have a good art mesh, it allows you to smoothly distort parts. This allows for neater looking animations. I'll be going over the physics setting next, and before you actually open the panel, you'll have to make sure to have your animations in which are going to have physics ready. So you're going to set parameters for these, like I have here. So I have an animation for my front hair, my side hair, my back hair, all that stuff. And now, if you have done your animations, click on modeling and then click physics settings. This should open up the physics window, and you should see your model on the side. If you move your cursor inside the little window of your model, you can actually move it. In order to add a physics, you have to click add and name your physics. So I'm going to make my hair physics, so I'm going to name it hair. And for your input preset, you're going to click whichever one of these corresponds with your physics. I'm going to click head since I'm doing my hair physics. Physics model preset, I recommend going for hair long since it's the best one. It's the safest option for me because it hasn't affected any of my physics in the past. I do this for any physics, whether or not it is hair. And the first thing you want to do is go to the output setting, click add, and select the parameters of the animations that your physics consists of. So I'm going to select all my hair parameters, click OK, and once you move your cursor, you can actually see that your hair actually moves. Make sure your effectiveness is at 100 and go back to input settings. Since the body moves together with the angle parameters, you can just delete these and click add to add your angle Y. And since the angle Z is a different type of input, you can put its effectiveness all the way to 100. Both angle X and Y add up to 100, so you can't have 100 effectiveness for each of them. I normally keep angle X at 60 and angle Y at 40. Now your physics may look good, but if you want to mess around with it more, you can go on over to the physics model settings down here and mess with the duration, shaking influence, reaction time, and I don't recommend messing
messing with convergence, since the higher the value, the less your physics is actually going to shake. Keep it at 1.5 so that it doesn't affect your flow that much. If you think that your physics looks good and you tested it out, you can click X and your physics should be set. As we come to a close, and before letting any guests in, we have to make sure that everything is nice and organized. So make sure to check your parameters, make sure that they are set with animations, make sure to check your deformers and parts to make sure that they're in the right places, and also make sure to check your physics so that they have nice and crisp animations. Also, make sure to fix any parts that may have gotten messed up in the process, and as with any creative project, make sure to take your time, take breaks when necessary, and overall have a nice and enjoyable experience. Making a VTuber can be as simple as preparing the food, setting the table, and inviting the guests, but it also should be an experience that helps you unlock creative potential that you never could before, and there's something really magical about that. With that note, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I really truly hope that I was able to help you in your VTuber journey. With that being said, have a great rest of your day or night. Bye bye.